There we go. Yeah, sometimes it is just literally one sec. J'ai pas eu le temps de mute. Make sure you do a resound there. Yeah. Hi, David. How was your day? This is about the nice Lighthouse. So. And, hi, hi. Here we go. Can Mobile just do a wee check to make sure that everyone can hear us who is watching online? Does this work? Yeah. And it's on. Okay. You're hearing it. Hello. Hi. My name is Myra, and I'm at Bookshop, and we are passionate, especially here, about small presses, and especially small presses that are pushing boundaries and translated fiction. So when Charco came to us and said Maureen was in town, we jumped at the opportunity. So thank you for being with us. And I'm going to read a briefly intro, and then I'm going to ask you to open the book, and then we're going to get a reading, and then I have some questions, and then you are welcome to ask them. So I should check. How do I say your surname? Shaughnessy?
Yeah.
Maureen Shaughnessy is a writer and translator from Spanish. Her published translations include work by Sarah Gallardo, Heba Urhart, and Nurit Kajastan. You're going to say those better than me. Her translations have been published by Archipelago Books and Cardboard House Press and featured in the Paris Review, World Literature Today, LALT, Acme, WWB, and Asymptote. Her forthcoming translations include a novel by Lucia Littmar and microfiction fictions by Leila Sapari. Based in Oregon, she now lives in, you said this beautifully, the French in me wants to say Bariloche, but it's not in it's Bariloche in Argentina. And tonight we are going to be talking about why did you come back every summer? And Belen's full name would be beautifully pronounced in Spanish as Belen Lopez Pedo. Yeah. We're going to be talking about this extraordinary book. We're going to be talking about what it is to translate a book like this, which deals with almost impossible to discuss topics in like general conversations, like childhood sexual abuse, but also the violence of the systems that come from seeking justice. So we'll be talking about those. If you are watching online, you can chat away in the chat and give us questions afterwards. Hi, come on in. But just to kick us off, Maureen, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to this particular book? It had its moment in Argentina when it first came out, and it's being translated. So a little introduction to what would you come back with? Yeah, thanks.
What I think I would start is giving a little bit of context about what's kind of the history of gender inequality and femicide and laws in Argentina, just to give like I actually did this research myself too, because I didn't know all of the dates and kind of give us a timeline of events. I'm not sure how familiar people are with Argentina or Latin America. I don't know much about Scotland, so yeah. But so I did take like a little quick cheat sheet. You might have heard that from 1976 to 1983 there was a dictatorship in Argentina. So democracy was restored in 1983, and then divorce was legalized in 1987. Yeah, and then all right, I wrote down a couple of dates just because I thought it was important. So then in 2006, the president, Mr. Kirchner, started a program called ESI, which is Educación Sexual Integral. So it's like sex education in schools, which there wasn't before. And 2006, which established reproductive and sexual rights, caring for body. I mean, this is education in the school, and it's still really controversial. I mean, the right wants to do away with SE, and it's a type of education that's received starting in preschool, in public school, all the way, and it's very specific to the age. I have two children, and I remember, 4-year-olds. They start to learn just about what's their body and it's their right, and nobody has the right to come and touch them, and just really simple things that I'm not sure what kind of sex ed other countries have, but in Argentina, what I found was this statistic I thought was interesting, which is that 70 to 80% of 12 to 14-year-olds receiving SE education could understand if they had been abused, which is something new that maybe before was unverbalized. So anyway, then there's a movement called Ni Una Menos, which I don't know if anybody's heard of here. So it's a feminist movement that started in Argentina after a really brutal murder of a 14-year-old girl by her boyfriend. She was pregnant. And it's a big protest started every year ever since 2015 on. So 300,000 people came out, and year after year now there's been like people on the streets, women on the streets. Gosh, it's hard to talk about. Yeah, it's hard to talk about. And femicide is a big problem in lots of the Latin American countries, and Argentina specifically. So, anyway, with all of that kind of context and background, we get the author of this book, we get her own case, which she was sexually abused by her uncle from ages 13 to 17, and she brought the case forward when she was in her early 20s in 2014. And then she started to write in writing workshop pieces of this book, which came up based on the idea of writing about identity. And she started to say, well, who am I now? What's my identity? I'm compiled from all these different voices, my own voices, the voices of other people talking to me. And so this book came out in fragments as different voices from her family and her community, herself talking to herself, the user talking, and which makes it a really interesting book. So, I mean, we can just get into the book now too, but I thought I could give a little bit of a background. Yeah. Because it's not written like a normal narrative book or a novel. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, it's born of exactly that climate, right? Where girls like her are treated a particular way, and her abuser isn't just her uncle, but he's also a police officer. And when you're talking about justice and who's meant to protect who and gonna believe who, this is a book that sort of crystallizes all of those tensions. And then it's so visceral, it's very hard to get away from the fact that this is autofiction. That these are the voices in her head. These are the experiences that she's gone through. And it's completely unflinching in such an uncomfortable way as a reader, and yet so compelling because she gives so much she entrusts you with the worst of the shame, with the worst of the things that people would say, with the things she said to herself. And it's an extraordinary feat and sort of a gift to the reader, to women, to we were saying this earlier, almost as part of feminist praxis, to say, when it says, why do you come back every summer? Why did you come back every summer? Like you, the reader, you are in some way complicit every time you've ever turned away, every time you've not asked the question, every time you weren't paying attention. She distills so much into the book. And as you say, it's done in a really interesting way, structurally, as a literary object. Can you tell our readers a little bit more about that? Like, what is the book composed of? And then maybe this is when I might get you to do a reading, because then we can go back and unpack some of the things in the reading.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the whole book is short fragments that are written. There's lots of different voices, and we don't get told who's speaking, so we don't know. I'll just start reading, but it's like who's talking, and then mix in between these very colloquial, second person and conversational pieces. We have the pieces from the legal documents from when she filed the case. So it's like legal language and then harsh, accusatory, family, community. The one other thing I would mention first is also just in terms of context, she grew up in the city of Buenos Aires, but she was sent to her aunt and uncle's house outside of the city every summer. She had a cousin who was around her age, and they lived in the province of Buenos Aires, outside of a small city, a very small town. And the uncle was a police officer in this town of maybe 2,000 people, outside of a city of maybe 60,000 people. So it's maybe hard for us all to kind of understand what the province of Buenos Aires and the countryside and the towns are like. But I mean, it was a really small community, and everyone in the community knew everyone. It's hard to kind of come forward. All right, so I'll just read from the beginning. This. So then, why did you come back every summer? Do you like to suffer? Why didn't you just stay home? There in Buenos Aires, dying of heat. Ah, no, that's right. It's because you couldn't. You didn't have anyone to take care of you. Now it makes sense. We were the ones to help you. We gave you a family. And this is how you repay us? We didn't love you. We only invited you here because your mom showered us with gifts. She gave us dresses, paid for trips and perfumes, all in exchange for having you here, taking you out to dinner with us, taking you out for a walk like a dog. We taught you how to clean. You stopped being the helpless little city girl who didn't even know how to make her own bed or wash the dishes. You always left them dirty and sink. Here, we handed you the broom and you started to sweep. We gave you some rags and a can of furniture polish and you learned to shine. First the bedrooms, then the living room and the kitchen last, always in that order. Do you remember? You even got mad once when we left your bag out on the patio so it wouldn't clutter up the house. Or when we threw out your tattered espadrilles and your hormone-stained underwear. Listen here, in this house, we put up with everything except filth. So naturally, your anger built up. But now you've taken it too far. To be honest, I wasn't expecting this. You've always been jealous of Florencia because she had lots of friends, because she could go out dancing and had so many clothes. But wait, I know why you did it. Because she has a family who loves her, and you don't. Criminal complaint affidavits. For the attention of the court. 1. Scope. I, the undersigned, hereby file an official complaint for the commission of a crime subject to public prosecution of which I was the victim, and therefore request the immediate intervention of justice to commence a criminal investigation in order to establish the facts and identify the perpetrators, pursuant to Article 149 and related provisions of the National Code of Criminal Procedure. 2. Defendant. Be it known to all persons that the individual herein described as a male party who is gainfully employed as a member of the Argentine Ministry of Security in the province of Buenos Aires. He is 47 years old and currently holds the rank of police commissioner. He resides at 86 Calle Belgrano, Santa Lucia, province of Buenos Aires. 3. Background. I hereby declare that I was born on February 24th, 1992, in the city of Buenos Aires. My immediate family includes my mother, my father, and one brother. I am presently 22 years old and am filing the statement to recount the experiences, hardships, and sufferings I endured during my adolescence. It is in my earnest desire to seek justice for these events. My uncle sexually abused me repeatedly between the ages of 13 and 17. 4. Legal definition. Pursuant to the foregoing declaration and without prejudice to the possibility that this inquiry may lead to the discovery and identification of other culpable parties, the alleged behavior described herein conforms to the definitions of the offense of sexual abuse as specified in Article 119 of the Argentine Criminal Code. 5. Petition. Giving the foregoing, I hereby request 1. That the charges be brought and hearing convened for purposes of ratification. 2. That a criminal investigation be commenced in order to ascertain the circumstances and identify the wrongdoers. If the aforementioned petition is granted, justice shall be served. Listen to me, I have something to tell you. No, I'm not seeing another woman, nothing like that. Cut the bullshit. This is about your daughter. Her father wasn't so wrong about Claudio. He had his reasons for not wanting to leave them alone together. No, wait, let me finish. The other day, when we were all eating together at your house, he noticed something. He doesn't look at her like an uncle should. No, listen to me. The way he looks at her, it's like he wants something, like he's turned on. Yeah, the way a dirty old man is turned on by a 15-year-old girl. Yes, really. He spent every minute he could looking at her ass. I could see him drooling once she put on her pajamas and come down to say goodnight. I could see it in his eyes, and then I knew it was real when he noticed me watching him and avoided my gaze for the rest of the night. Don't cry. I don't want to upset you, but I had to say something. You'll have to decide for yourself what to do. She's your daughter. It's none of my business. But I'll say it again. It's my duty to tell you what happened. Besides, he fits the bill. He's a psychopath. A textbook case, and you know it. He bought your whole family, and he bought you too. He manipulated you. He convinced you of his generosity and made sure he was beyond reproach. He imposed his authority with everyone's consent, even his own wife and his daughter, Florencia. Think about it, and then we'll talk. Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Juan. It's a real pleasure to meet you. You're much taller in person. Your mom told me a little bit about what happened. You're really brave, you know that? That son of a bitch is going to jail. How could he go and screw up your life like this? Just look at you, your regret. Don't worry, he's going to pay. Come here, sit down, tell me more about it. How did it start? Your mom told me that you were 13, but we're better off saying you were 11. That's how things go with the law. See, you have to exaggerate a little. To all effects, it's the same, right? What difference does it make? 1 year more, 1 year less. He raped you either way. Ah, no, that's right. He didn't rape you. Then why are you here? What was your name? Oh, right. It was almost right. Close, but no cigar. Bloody hell. We would have been better off. This way, our case is screwed. Judges are more sympathetic to rape victims. The younger, the better. With just some fingers, groping, I doubt they'll give him more than probation. But oh well, we'll get something. Are you sure he didn't penetrate you? Yes, I remember what you told me. If your father hadn't shown up that day, then perhaps we'd be having a different conversation. But, well, here we are. Like I said in my email, I'm going to need you to be more precise. Date, time, place, everything needs to be more exact. Yes, I know the images are blurry. It's always the same story. But the judges need facts, not dreams. They aren't convinced by some dumb fantasy. Look, let's try something. Go home, and when you get there, sit down and write. Yeah, let's do that. Better if you write the affidavits yourself. Take your time and put it into your own words. Write down everything that happened. And make sure to ask for justice, because nobody else is going to do it for you, not even me. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think in so many of those pieces, and one of the things that struck me in the book was the indignities of seeking justice that happened in all those other ways, being confronted by all the people who failed along the way to look out for this kid. And so I wanted to ask about the first, kind of about the process of translation. Because this is a hard book to read in some ways. It's a good book to read. I mean, it really is, you're never sitting with any one voice for very long. But it's a hard book to read, and you must have spent a lot of time with it for translating it. And it's autofiction, which is a huge act of trust to put her actual story in someone else's hands. Like, how do you negotiate that, sit with that approach translating it? Yeah, so if you just actually sit down and read the book, it takes less than 2 hours. But when I first came across this book, and the version in Spanish is even similar, but it's not impressive. I mean, I started reading it and I couldn't, so I had to put it down. And I think it also, because there's a bunch of this legal text right there, and
my understanding of it as a reader is like, this is what we come up against always with the law, that, we don't understand the legal jargon and it's confusing. And so as a reader, we're like, where is the information that I need in all of this, and so as a translator, I had to I did end up separating, and I left all the legal stuff for like a different time, translated that separately. That's why I worked first on all the different voices. And I went through the book and translated, not knowing. I mean, sometimes it's obvious who the voices are. It's her mom or her stepdad or the lawyer, right? Yeah. But sometimes the voices are not quite as obvious, and I wanted a little more information. Just because of how colloquial it is, and how old is this person, what generation, where are they coming from, what kind of expressions that they use in English. Sometimes it's important to really have something like this, you need to know exactly who it is. Yeah. And so I was able to get in touch with the author. She was very kind and generous with her time, and the first time I asked her if she would tell me kind of who the different voices were, she was like, well, the point is, in the book, there's a reason why I didn't put, here's the mother's. But I eventually said, well, I've got like a short list. Can you just share with me a little bit so I can, so she did. She helped me a little bit through that. And then all of the legal parts were not as visceral, but equally hard, because it's just like the sloppy language, and I'm not a legal translator. And I wanted it to feel cumbersome, just like in a regular text. So, I got in touch with lawyer friends and in both, Spanish natives and English natives. And then I'm from the United States, and this has been published in the UK, and legal systems are different. Yeah. So there's all of those little layers that go into.
How long did it take you?
Probably, I think I had a year to work on it.
Okay.
But it wasn't a quick piece of work.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's a short book, but like I said, kind of as translators usually work on multiple projects.
Yeah. Yeah, there are choices that you make then as well, right? What voice, what term, something that might be oblique in one language has to be directed in another because there isn't the same word or the same turn of phrase. It feels so precise and so urgent, the way it's told. I love that. I don't know, symbiosis that seems to happen between a writer and a translator, because it's like, here, I'm holding your book, and I feel like I'm, as somebody who never would have read it otherwise, not speaking Spanish. Here it comes to another audience. On that note, that idea of like what is culturally specific, and why why translate? Why this story making to an English speaking audience, whether that's here or in the States? Like, this is a story that is so specific to one woman, one girl, so specific to one region in the cultural context, as you say, of like the village outside of the town, in the province, by the big city. And yet so much of it can resonate to any audience, anywhere in the world where we experience patriarchy. Like, all of the hallmarks of patriarchy are in it. And so I wonder whether or not you consciously tried to make it as specific to the Argentine context, or like cultural references, or whether or not those weren't in the original text, and it was a lot more blank. Whether or not you were conscious of like an English speaking reading it to empathize with it in this context, or if you didn't need to do that because these are universal themes, tragically.
I would say definitely this book was much more universal and not so culturally specific as other translations of it. I mean, other than kind of getting the idea of this town, or just kind of the landscape of Argentina. It's a country where I think like 40% of the population lives in, and it's a huge city, and then just a lot of space. I mean, some of that I think is, I mean, depends on where you're from, might be harder to kind of gauge, but just kind of go back and forth between these two places. But yeah, I do think the Len story is that really universal. Yeah. I'm trying to think of, there are a lot of books that are really culturally specific, and full of kind of play on words and jargon, and Argentina specific has Vago. Right. And this book didn't have, but the thing that's to me was, I was trying all the time to get across was the way that people actually speak, because she did such a good job of kind of, you can tell from the very first line, right? Why did you come back? It's, I mean, it's written in the second person the whole time, talking to someone, and each one of her entries feels just like, like a monologue taken out of the theater position. Someone speaking. So, you asked how long it took me to translate it. What I did was, I mean, it's kind of like 6 drafts or something. Right. Because I just kept reading it over to myself out loud and changing things to try to make it speak. Yeah. Because that's what in her original.
Yeah, it's also so necessary. If you're not going to identify who the speaker is, then, and you want each vignette to have its own, carry its own tone,
right? Then
the language has got a lot of heavy lifting to do.
Yeah.
Do not end that project. But it works. It works. I wonder whether, just again talking about cultural context, would it have been, was it especially transgressive to publish this book in Argentina? Was it received as something that was shocking and feminist, and that people, I mean, it was published in small press? Was it considered something that was a radical book even in its first iteration? So it came out, I mean, to go back over a little bit writing process, she started writing the book in 2016 and it came out in 2018. And she started writing these different fragments, like I said, in the writing workshop. The way that young writers kind of get their work out in Argentina is through writing workshops with more established writers. A lot of writers there to also sustain themselves and make a living. And then just to get still involved with young writers, they teach workshops, which is pretty, what I've heard, unique to Argentina, or other countries have kind of started it based on, it started kind of in the 60s and led into the 70s during the dictatorship of people and read together. And so Belen was taking a writing workshop with Gabriela Cabezon Camara, who actually also wrote the foreword to this book. And there's other books that have been translated by her that have been translated into English. And so she was invited to read some of these fragments at the Buenos Aires Book Fair at kind of a table of women under the slogan of Ni una menos, which is what I was mentioning before. Ni una menos, the translation would be something like, we don't want another one to disappear. It's kind of a lot, but we don't, not one less, I guess would be, Ni una menos, not one female, one. And so she read some fragments, but she hadn't finished working on the book. She read at the Buenos Aires Book Fair, where she was invited to read them on a radio show. And the radio recording then went viral because some of the authors posted it, and
And then she had a whole slew of kind of like young women and who related to her story that were interested in it. Right. She had already approached the major publishing houses, but they had turned down the idea for the story because it's a hard sell, right? And it's not the kind of book that a big publisher wants to confront. Yeah, today still. And so kind of through the story getting out, this small press that put it out, which is called Marketing Selva, which is actually an anarchist and feminist press, that's a very specific small press. They said they wanted to put the book out. So what happened there? It had, it came out in an indie press. Did it have like a massive impact? I mean, it wasn't a bestseller. There was at least one famous actress who, after reading her book, came out and brought up charges against her abuser, right, and said, "I'm doing this based on Milen's book." They're kind of the same generation, right? And it was something that happened when she was filming. She was 14 or 16, and she was filming with like a 45-year-old man, right? Actor, right? Happened 10 years before. So I mean, yeah, people were inspired, right, to bring their stories forward, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's always nice, are you reaching 10,000 people who read it and put it down, or are you reaching, a smaller number that really changes the way you think and feel about the world? Or we were talking earlier about like, how do you, as a bookseller, put in someone's hands a book like this? When someone asks, like, for a recommendation, of like, do you have a great book? Or I love fiction translation. Do you have a great book to recommend? And it's like, obviously, this is a great book, and I would recommend it. But you never know what baggage you're meeting someone with. And so to recommend a book that is unflinchingly not about anything else. This is not part of a story arc to something else. This is not a story of her later life, or this is that story, her search for justice in the aftermath of that, and you sit with it for 2 hours. It's a hard book to recommend, and books that deal with sexual violence or gendered violence are very hard to recommend, which is why one would assume a big publisher would struggle with seeing how it would be commercially viable. And yet, they are books that are so vitally important. It feels like a book that fosters a different kind of empathy or introspection about the role that we play in these things happening around us. Did you find yourself changed? Because you weren't going to read it. You started it, you put it down, and then you were translating it. You had no choice but to read it. As a reader, did it change you?
As a mother, I mean, I have 2 daughters, and one of my daughters is now 12. I mean, it's the kind of thing. That's why I brought up also the SC, the sexual education in the schools, because kind of to continue the political conversation here in Argentina after some of these laws were made, with some of the recent presidencies in December. Argentina just elected a new president who's neoliberal, far right, Trump style. And he's already said he wants to rescind the abortion law, that there's no such thing as, like, violence doesn't have genders, he said. So he's going to get rid of the ministry. I mean, Fernandez, who was the previous president, had started the Ministry of Women and Gender and Diversity, right, to kind of take on these issues, because it's not like things are getting better. I mean, there's still over like 300 femicides a year in Argentina. Numbers are staying worse. Yeah. So, the government has been trying to address some of this, whereas before it hadn't. Right. And now we get the backlash of the new presidency that's like everything that's been worked towards being swiped away. And SE of education is part of this, is one of the ideas. had to put on condoms in school, little kids, you know. So, I mean, but at the same time, here I am as a mother and thinking, I need to know that, you know, my own kids and that their peers are all going to be looking out for each other and for themselves.
Yeah.
And I know that the schools are doing a good job of it.
Right.
You know, and so it's scary to think that now that right that we've been fighting for may be taken away. Maybe just
But again, talking of universals, like those are all things that resonate with our political climate in the UK, right? We have a government that wants to roll back sex education, that wants to reinstate restrictions on like what queer education kids get, that are taking their first pot shots at abortion law. They've been actively doing it in roundabout ways, but now MPs feeling quite comfortable talking about various things about restricting abortion laws. It's
happening around the world.
It's happening everywhere. It's, you know, but it's interesting. Yeah, the books that come at a particular moment in time that resonate with a particular moment in time often is like a response to something. Speaking of time, the book came out before the trial reached a conclusion, which must have been like a legal minefield in some respects. But I wanted to ask, just in terms of this idea of time, how did you have to write it, translate it, like into that void of not knowing what would happen, or was the translation after the court case finished?
No, the ruling
Right.
for against her uncle just came last year in January. So I think it was 9 years after she originally filed the case. He was found guilty, which is actually probably in part because of the novel and coming out. Because so many other cases, there's always like a loophole and people that they find a way out to quit people. So I feel like that there was extra pressure on there because the book had come out in Spanish and articles have been written about it. So yeah, he was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in jail. Fined, I think, like $80,000. Okay. And they then wrote a piece for El País, which is the newspaper in Spain. She's living in Spain now. About what? Finally, I can say his name, right? His full name, and I can say this is what happened. And so I think, the book is autofiction, but it came out somewhere in that gray area and really stuff. For telling a story. It's not legal documented in itself.
Right. Because what you're sitting with in the book is the aftermath, is the active pursuit of justice that feels so impossible, and all of the frustrations and indignity and erasure that happens in that window of time in between, where she just endures so much shit just to do what is the only thing she can do that feels right. Whether it's for more, and you see the legal documents.
Yeah, most of the other legal documents are like affidavits, and they're different people. A lot of the texts are kind of juxtaposed, so you'll get, the mother's voice, and then right thereafter or before that, you'll get kind of the mother's testimony.
Yeah. Okay.
So even though, and in the legal documents, it does say the relationship with the victim, so you kind of get an idea who's there, who's talking, that it might be her brother or her aunt or cousin.
Yeah, there's one way to make the task of parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering, does anyone in from the child? I will let you ask.
Yeah.
And I'm not being rude and scrolling my phone. I'm looking at the online audiences.
Do you need to do it in the mic or the license? Sorry.
Good one.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
Yes, so my question was about, I feel like authors often get asked about what their readers are that they have in mind when they are writing something, and if there are certain people that they're particularly worried about, or who they imagine reading this. And I wonder if you translator have anything like that, and more on a kind of broader scale, like when you were translating this, did you imagine where it would go? Did you imagine what kind of audiences it would reach, or what kind of conversations you would be having about it? Or were you just so in the text that that kind of was pushed out? Thanks for your question. I think in the act of actually just translating, it's like pretty nitty gritty. It's just trying to do justice to the language, not even necessarily like first the language and book and then the author maybe. But the audience is always going to be whoever the publisher's audience is for me in a lot of ways. I mean, if it's a text that I choose to translate, and I also am going to try to think who is my audience. But in a case like this where I had already been asked to translate the book by Chaco Press, I kind of know that their audience is, that they're an indie press that's working all with Latin American books. They're going into English, and so their readers there's some subtlety there of interest in Latin America or in international literature that maybe with the bigger press there's not. Not that really answers your question. Okay. There's one from online next, and then I'll answer back to you. From Ellie or Eli, do you feel a sense of ownership over the work as a translator? And have you had an author push back at one of your interpretations? I mean, definitely I feel a sense of ownership because I wrote it. So, like, for example, just now when I was reading, I feel comfortable because they're all decisions that I made. And there's a sense of knowing that that choices, words that I chose. Yeah. What was the second part of the question? Have you ever had an author push back at your interpretation of their work? No, not a pushback. I mean, it's kind of in the broader sense. I feel like with authors, some of them are like, "Oh, I can't be bothered. You're the translator. You'll figure it out," and which is fine. And then there's other people who maybe also, because I'm translating into English, which is the language that a lot of people know, right? So people will be like, "Oh, why did you choose that?" Or what about this? It happens maybe more in poetry with a big book. You're not going to have your author reading through every word, but there's sometimes in poetry, it's more important to think about the rhythm or how a word sounds, or there's multiple meanings. And so it can be really helpful if an author has a sense of language in English because I can ask for their input of like different ideas. Yeah. But I haven't had anybody ever come up against me. No, you got that wrong. Does Belen speak English? I don't know. Okay. I met her. Yeah. We spoke in Spanish. Okay. So I asked her questions and queries, but always in Spanish. Okay. Yeah. Good question. Probably. A lot of people do. Okay. But she hasn't come back. Let me put that in. Close, but no cigar. I know it's been translated into a few other languages as well. Into Italian and German. I'm not sure. Interesting. Yeah. Is there another question in the room? Yeah.
I'm Spanish, but I find Argentina a bit difficult sometimes because I actually have Argentinian friends coming with me today. I didn't know there was about an Argentinian book. I thought it was about feminism and stuff. but he canceled on me. Wow. He would regret it. And yeah, I don't know a question. I have a question. Oh yeah, well, because I think I found Argentina sometimes difficult. Like some of the words are not the same as I'm from Spain, so they're different. So what resources do you use to? Because there might be some. I actually find it very difficult to answer like a general question of what this word will mean in Spanish. Or have you studied Spanish from Spain, or have you studied more Spanish from South America? That would be one question. And then the title of the book, I thought, is that a question for her and trying to like the blame on her and say why come back into back to the house if you were like right there, like it's your fault for going back. I don't know, that's my interpretation of what I saw happening. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. Um, First, this question, I mean, the book starts out with that same question. So why did you come back every summer? So I mean, I think your interpretation that, you know, if she had been assaulted year after year, why did she keep coming back? Is what the people in the small town, her aunts and some of her cousins were asking her, why did you keep coming back? But of course, we're looking at it. I mean, this is part of the complexity of the story because it was a man that she knew well and was also a father figure to her at the same time. And you know, she was young and didn't really have the resources for the way to kind of take a step back and say, you know, what happened to me. So definitely that's a good interpretation of the title. And it's the same title in Spanish, Porque volvías padre. Yeah. And then in terms of your question about Argentine Spanish, yeah, I mean, Spanish is a language where there's so many different variations based on countries because there's so many different places where it's spoken. And Argentina has like a very specific, thick vocabulary that's different from Spain and Mexico. I lived there, that helps a lot. I've lived in Argentina for maybe like 13 years now. And I actually lived in Spain for 6 years before that. So I also translate books from Spanish from Spain. There are other countries where I've read really colloquial books, like there was one from Ecuador that I wouldn't translate that. I would just say, I can't do that. I don't know enough Spanish to be able to get into it. But yeah, living there and then, you know, we just have our sources that we go to as translators. Like for this, I said I had to find like legal people. And sometimes it's more, you know, I don't know, I'm supposed to translate it like a book about football, maybe like soccer football, okay, you know, and like I'll get my sources for that one too, you know. So yeah, thank you.
I've got another one from Shay online. Thank you for these. And I think we are running out of time, so this might be our last one, unless there's a burning one in the room. Who's saying, fascinated by how the book put pressure on law to get justice. How do you feel about literature and culture playing a role in the broader search for justice? So do you approach a book like this or literature as a feminist project?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the main reason why I'm drawn to a book like this, which is so difficult. Writing is a political act. Reading is a political act these days too, right? Like actually reading the whole book. And certainly, you know, dealing social justice issues being woven into literature, I think is like such a great gift because it's art and you know, social change and social movement and different types of like leftist politics being brought into poetic language. I mean, that's kind of like where it's at. Definitely. Yeah.
This book definitely does that. And it's fascinating that it moved the dial like for justice in like very real terms for her. And then for women who to come forward after afterwards. But the context it gives any reader to understand and experience the might feel foreign, and understand and experience it is so tragically common. Whether that is the childhood abuse or the experience of being disbelieved at every stage in the system looking for justice. So thank you for translating it and bringing it with all of its complexity and its beautiful language to an English reading. It is genuinely a gift. Thank you for being with us to talk about it tonight. And thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you to everyone who's watching online. And I think we will call it there. Thank you very much. Will you join me in thanking?